Out of the blue, he received a message stating that the monarch was ready to support and mentor him, stirring his curiosity. Returning to Beast Rain, he asked whether this monarch was essentially a king, leading to a knowing grin from Beast Rain. It seemed that Jae-hwan had finally developed an interest in this matter. Beast Rain went on to clarify that these monarchs acted as guardians of the Great Land, extending their power and backing to those who successfully completed the game and ventured into the Great Land. Jae-hwan expressed his confusion about the idea of gaining power and support, prompting Beast Rain to provide further clarification. He emphasized that Jae-hwan's choice of which monarch to align with would significantly shape his future. Beast Rain promised to do everything in his power to help Jae-hwan connect with a powerful monarch if he followed his guidance. However, there was a catch. This support depended on Jae-hwan committing to complete the main game. Jae-hwan, after considering this information, couldn't help but compare Beast Rain's persuasive pitch to that of an insurance salesman, which left him feeling a bit embarrassed. Nevertheless, he eventually agreed to follow Beast Rain's advice, with the condition that he would leave after 10 days. 9 days later, while Jae-hwan focused on intense swordsmanship training, Beast Rain watched his progress on a screen with some frustration. He thought Jae-hwan was spending his days on a seemingly pointless pursuit. Although he was becoming impatient, Beast Rain reminded himself that the end was near. He remembered how he had been deceived into buying the tower and, filled with anger, he took it out on the sofa. He blamed these individuals for his frustration. The tower was said to be an antique, a first-generation tower of unknown age, and lacked a feature to forcibly end the tutorial without losing the rewards, a feature that a third-generation tower might have. However, he had chosen the first-generation tower because it was more affordable. So, all he could do was wait for the next day. Finally, the last day arrived. Beast Rain eagerly provided Jae-hwan with all the information about the main game, and Jae-hwan thanked him. The invitation to join the main game reappeared on the screen, and Beast Rain urged Jae-hwan to click the accept button this time, thrilled that the long-awaited day had arrived. To his astonishment, Jae-hwan surprised him by delivering a sudden blow, leaving him utterly bewildered. As Jae-hwan stood there, with Beast Rain's sword piercing his body, he asked what Jae-hwan was up to. Jae-hwan's response was clear: he intended to hunt him down. He immediately attacked again. Jae-hwan had noticed something strange before this. There were shiny particles that made his sword moves feel off, causing discomfort. During this, Beast Rain raised his hand to strike Jae-hwan. Swiftly, Jae-hwan used his sword to cut off Beast Rain's arm. He realized that the odd feeling he'd experienced was a sensation of being alive. But before he could react further, thick steel-like vines burst from the ground, trapping Jae-hwan. While Beast Rain healed his severed arm, he admitted that Jae-hwan was unlike any human he'd seen before. He wished he'd realized this earlier. Jae-hwan, still trapped, questioned Beast Rain about his plans, saying he wouldn't play along without agreeing. Beast Rain acknowledged this and revealed that he'd given up on getting Jae-hwan's consent long ago. He explained that the tower's game was programmed to end automatically after 100 days, a fact that surprised Jae-hwan. Beast Rain explained that his plan was to hold Jae-hwan until those 100 days passed, then have him participate in the main game without resistance. Jae-hwan, with his sword in hand, teased Beast Rain, calling himself the master of teasing in this realm. Jae-hwan went on to reveal astonishing facts about Beast Rain's long life and dark intentions. He disclosed that Beast Rain had lived for 784 years, traveled through 128 worlds, and schemed among various tribes. This revelation left Beast Rain stunned. Jae-hwan also mentioned that Beast Rain had intended to hand him over to a mysterious monarch. Dumbfounded by Jae-hwan's knowledge, Beast Rain demanded to know who Jae-hwan truly was. Jae-hwan smiled and revealed that he was the product Beast Rain had nurtured within the tower for many years. Jae-hwan shattered everything, declaring that he was not a product anymore. Emerging from the wreckage, Jae-hwan charged toward Beast Rain at incredible speed, leaving Beast Rain bewildered. Coming close, Jae-hwan struck his formidable sword into Beast Rain's shoulder, causing him intense pain for the first time. As Beast Rain pursued Jae-hwan, he couldn't understand why the wound in his shoulder was worsening instead of healing, finding it impossible to comprehend. Looking at Jae-hwan's formidable sword, Beast Rain grew increasingly shocked, recognizing it as the overload adapter. Jae-hwan revealed that after reaching the tower's 100th floor, he had doubted everything: the tower, the devil's power, and his own human strength. Strangely, in response to his doubts, the world itself began to unravel, and his uncertainties began to fade. He eventually reached a point where he had no more doubts. Saying this, he launched another powerful attack, forcing the devil to step back. Realizing he had no other option, Beastrain abandoned the time constraints and revealed his true, devilish form. Then, he charged at Jae-won, declaring he wouldn't hold back and demanding Jae-won's surrender. As he got closer to Jae-won, Beastrain used his sharp claws to harm his face and tear at his body, causing blood to flow. During this, he noted that Jae-won was impressive but had his limits against a devil like him. In response, thorns sprouted from the ground, piercing Jae-won's body. He wondered if this was the end as blood dripped from his hands while he gripped the Ice Dragon sword, and the tutorial's countdown reached its final moments. Meanwhile, Beastrain moved toward him, stating that Jae-won would have to participate in the main game. But just as he neared Jae-won, the countdown ended, and a bright light emanated from the sword, knocking Beastrain off balance. Jae-won, now on his feet, remembered defeating formidable monsters on lower floors and charged at Beastrain, determined to defeat him too. Seeing the immense power of the sword, Beastrain was shocked. The sword began emitting lightning strikes, tearing his body apart and causing him great pain as he fell to the ground. Jae-won reached out, emphasizing that humans were not to be traded, digitized, or sold. He declared they weren't mere pawns and that they wouldn't follow the script anymore. Instead, he planned to destroy this world, ascend to the next floor, and keep going until he destroyed the entire realm created by beings like Beastrain. Beastrain begged him to stop, claiming there was no next level. But Jae-won remained resolute, citing the cryptic writings he'd found on walls while climbing the tower's floors. He believed these writings were the work of the tower's creator and pointed to them as evidence of the next level's existence, recalling seeing similar signs on various floors. Recalling the signals that had led him to the illusion tree, Jae-won turned to Beastrain and asked whether this place was indeed the root of the illusion tree. He noted that if it were, there should be a trunk somewhere. As he gazed up at the ceiling, he thought aloud that he might find a way forward by breaking through it. With conviction, he gripped his sword and shattered the roof, leaving Beastrain in shock as his tower crumbled. As the ceiling started to cave in, the system swiftly detected the problem, checked for anyone else in the tower, and ended the tutorial session. Sometime later, Jae-won found himself in a forest-like location and remarked that he had finally reached the next level. While he explored the island, a host of enormous beasts suddenly emerged from the trees, surrounding him as he stood his ground with his sword. In a surprising turn of events, one of the beasts leaped at him, but Jae-won skillfully dispatched it with a single thrust of his sword, hardly moving from his spot. After dealing with that creature, he turned to face an even larger one behind him. Recognizing that a simple thrust wouldn't work against such a huge monster, Jae-won tightly grasped his sword and thrusted with all his might, tearing the beast into pieces. After vanquishing all of them, Jae-won cut off their horns and gathered them, thinking that the monsters on this floor were much weaker compared to the previous ones. While occupied with this task, Jae-won suddenly heard a voice. He turned to find beings that looked like extraterrestrial creatures, clearly angered by his killing of the beasts. The leader among them issued commands in an unfamiliar code language that left Jae-won bewildered. Understanding the word horn in their command, Jae-won asked if they wanted the horns and suggested a deal. He would give them the horns in exchange for information about their location. However, the creatures paid no attention to his offer and rushed toward him at great speed, attempting to attack. Jae-won managed to dodge their strikes. He warned them that if they tried to attack him again, he would kill them all. Nonetheless, it became evident that they had no intention of stopping. Sighing, Jae-won decided to eliminate them all. After dealing with the creatures, he approached the leader, who was lying on the brink of death, and asked about their current location. In response, the creature expressed amazement at Jae-won's strength in the same code language. Growing frustrated, Jae-won grabbed him by the antennas protruding from his head, causing him to scream, and demanded that he speak in a language he could understand. The creature, in response, bit his own tongue and succumbed, leaving Jae-won to acknowledge their remarkable willpower, surpassing even his expectations. Looking at the broken antennas in his hand, he created a small mound of sand and placed them inside. After that, he began searching for valuable items that might provide him with the information he sought. As he was exploring, he stumbled upon a small pouch, which turned out to be quite extraordinary. It could hold many items despite its size, almost like a magical inventory. Jae-won appreciated it, especially because he hadn't been able to use his usual interface system since leaving the tower. Jae-won decided to put the horns he had collected into the pouch. It made him think about his hopes of using the interface system in other dimensional worlds, like the Almighty Land, which had turned out to be a letdown. He also found various multicolored stones of different shapes, which he discovered were spirit stones that could boost one's spiritual energy. Collecting these stones from all the creatures he had encountered, Jae-hwan realized that each of those creatures had one of these valuable stones. Seeing their worth, he stashed them in his backpack. Looking at the dead beasts, he wondered if he should just leave them behind, considering the sheer number of items he had to store. Eventually, he continued his exploration, gathering different weapons, fruits, and other things he could use. While exploring the island, Jae-hwan came across a map. Opening it, he found it was a map to the Chaos Illusion Tree, a place he hadn't heard about from the information the devil had given him. Meanwhile, on another part of the island, enormous beasts were battling humans led by a woman. She had a cruel smile as she threw her dagger at one of the beasts, accidentally hitting one of her own group members. After apologizing, she decided to hunt on her own, leaving the group. The injured person was angry at her clumsy actions. Later on, they heard her voice again and turned around, shocked. They saw a gigantic bihorn beast following the woman, realizing she had provoked this formidable creature, putting them in danger. As they contemplated what to do, Jae-hwan watched from a distance, noting that the woman appeared to be the strongest among them and wondering about their relationship. At that moment, a woman who had been watching Jae-hwan for a while walked up to him. She was curious about his identity because she knew that no one in the Chaos region could easily defeat a bihorn with a simple attack. So, she asked him where he was from. Jae-hwan turned to her and asked what Chaos was, which surprised her because she thought everyone knew about it. As the group started to move away, Jae-hwan explained that he was just passing through and didn't belong to this place. He also mentioned that he didn't understand the languages spoken in this region. The leader of the group found this strange because it was unusual for a language barrier to exist here. Later on, they brought up the topic of the bihorn's body again, and Jae-hwan agreed to let them have it. During their conversation, the woman remained quiet, wondering how he had killed the bihorn so easily without using any special skills. She couldn't use her powers to figure out who he was and concluded that his spirit power was different from that of an adapter. Curious about his identity, she asked him who he was and where he came from. In response, he asked her what chaos was, which frustrated her. She sarcastically asked if he couldn't understand a simple request for an introduction. Jae-hwan clarified that he understood but explained that thinking about his past brought up memories of his childhood, school days, and life on Earth. He believed that all those memories had lost meaning when he entered the tower and gained new memories with his comrades. However, those memories vanished when the tutorial ended, and he suspected that even if his comrades were on Earth, they would be strangers because they didn't share those memories. After thinking it over, Jae-hwan told the woman that he couldn't remember anything. She got angry and accused him of claiming to have amnesia, but he corrected her, saying he never claimed that. She insisted it didn't matter and asked if he was the mighty of the abyss, leaving him confused. Getting frustrated with her questions, he told her to stop because he had the information he wanted. He reached into his backpack and showed her the ice dragon sword, surprising her. Because it was a spirit weapon. This made her realize that he didn't defeat the bihorn just because he was strong, he had a powerful weapon. At this point, the other members of the group also noticed his spirit weapon and were surprised. Meanwhile, the woman was annoyed with her group for getting involved in her mission and thought she could have completed it on her own. Then, she had an idea and asked Jae-hwan if he wanted to hear a proposition. Afterward, she took the time to explain the concept of chaos to him in detail. They also discussed an upcoming party. During their conversation, she revealed a shocking truth: her companions were part of a dangerous clan called the Red Fox. She urged Jae-hwan to eliminate them, emphasizing the serious threat they posed. She even mentioned that they might try to harm him, which left him surprised. As time passed, the sky grew darker, and one of the group members suggested staying put for the night. They were concerned that walking in the dark could expose them to dangerous creatures. They all agreed to camp at their current spot, lit a fire, and sat around it to rest. Jae-hwan, lying under a tree, looked up at the shimmering particles in the air. He thought that the village on the map was nearby. While holding one of these glowing specks, Jae-hwan received a notification that he had reached the second stage of awakening. This granted him the ability to hear the thoughts and conversations of those around him. Using this new skill, he overheard the group talking about him. To his disappointment, they didn't think highly of him and saw him as just a monster slayer who relied on his weapon. Hearing their unkind words, Jae-hwan became worried about their true intentions. He figured they would be surprised to learn he had obtained his weapon from the illusion tree's root. He also found it strange that these people were so interested in the equipment from the tower, which he didn't consider very valuable. As he gazed at the starry sky, he started to doubt whether this place held the power he was seeking. Suddenly, the group around the fire got up and began approaching him while he remained calm on the ground. The woman noticed his composure and asked why he was lying down, pointing out that people were coming toward them. She helped him up and suggested using a special sword to fend off the approaching enemies. Unfortunately, Jae-hwan revealed he had lent that sword to someone for inspection. At that moment, the hostile group closed in around him, and their leader expressed his intention to take possession of the coveted sword. The woman countered, stating they couldn't harm Jae-hwan as long as she was with him. The members of the opposing group admitted they had been called to eliminate just 2 people and wanted to do so quickly and return. In response, the woman questioned their willingness to resort to violence and prepared herself for the impending fight, finally revealing her true abilities. As the members of the hostile group charged at them, the woman rushed forward with incredible speed, knocking them to the ground with powerful blows. She also threw a dagger that hit one of them in the forehead, resulting in his death. She declared her anger and threw numerous daggers at the other group members, warning them that they were about to face a terrible fate. Upon realizing that her original intent had been to eliminate them from the very start, the group's leader expressed his regret for not recognizing it when she lured the monsters towards them. Fueled by anger, he demanded to know who had summoned the Shadow Warriors. In response, she asserted that it didn't matter, given their actions had caused the deaths of numerous innocent people, making them targets for many. She then swiftly hurled daggers in their direction. The leader of the opposing group chuckled, stating that the Shadow Warriors wouldn't have been summoned for such weak adversaries. He easily shattered all of her daggers while gripping Jae-hwan's formidable sword. He suspected that she must have received a secret request, one that would lead to her demise at their hands. As she gazed at the sword, she commented on his desire to face her with a spirit weapon. He laughed, assuring her that he had taken all necessary precautions. Suddenly, more figures began to appear around them, all highly skilled adapters numbering at least 40. This revelation left her astonished, while the leader explained that such precautions were essential when facing a shadow warrior and someone capable of slaying a byhorn with a single strike. He regretted having called his master to join the battle if he knew acquiring the spirit weapon would be this straightforward. Suddenly, a colossal hybrid humanoid creature emerged behind them, recognized by the woman as the Black Fox. She questioned his involvement in a minor skirmish, to which the Black Fox responded by calling her the Witch of Massacre. He revealed that over half of the Red Fox clan had assembled to hunt her down, and his clan members charged towards her. Acknowledging the apparent honor, the woman suggested that he wait and watch, secretly uncertain about defeating him in a one-on-one battle since he was a third-stage adapter. Turning to Jae-hwan, she offered her apologies and explained that she wouldn't be able to protect him. She tossed a nightmare stone in his direction, instructing him to take it and flee. Holding the stone, Jae-hwan inquired about its purpose. She informed him that it was a return stone, which he could use to escape to the nearest castle. She clarified that it was her only one and urged him to use it, leaving him perplexed. He came to realize that the stone he held wasn't a magical time travel stone but rather a powerful one for the present. He clenched it tightly, thinking about his friend Yunhwan's tragic end. He couldn't help but wonder if giving Yunhwan this stone instead of a fake one could have saved him. He turned to the woman and asked if she would go back to the past if she could. She replied firmly that it wasn't the time for such thoughts and that she wouldn't want to change her past. She believed she had done her best in life, and if it was her time to die, she'd accept it. To reassure her, he placed his hand on her shoulder and told her she wouldn't die that day. Surprisingly, he drew his sword and quickly attacked their enemies, defeating them one by one as he moved forward. The Black Fox, their leader, tried to empower his group with a special skill, but Jae-hwan countered it with his own skill, effortlessly defeating them all. When he reached the Black Fox, he thrust his sword into the creature's claw, causing it immense pain. This left the leader in shock, and Jae-hwan, after killing the Black Fox, took his spirit sword. The remaining group members fled. Meanwhile, Jae-hwan tightly gripped his sword and used a powerful technique, creating a storm that tore apart the fleeing enemies. The woman was amazed by his overwhelming strength. She had initially thought he was naive when he allowed the group to take the Byhorn corpse, but now she knew he was much stronger than she had assumed. Curious about his identity, she asked who he really was. He playfully suggested she had forgotten and teased her about memory loss. She then asked for the return stone she had given him earlier, but he had lost it, frustrating her. She couldn't understand how he could lose such a valuable item, but he simply walked away. Later, he sat by the fire, finding the surroundings peaceful. The woman continued to search for the return stone, but it was nowhere to be found. Jaehwan told her she already knew his identity, leaving her puzzled. He stated that he was a human, making her wonder if he was joking. As she sat by the fire, Jaehwan asked if she was human, and she confirmed, saying he was almost human too. Jaehwan clenched his fist upon hearing this, and she looked puzzled, trying to figure out what he was thinking. While sitting quietly with him, she thought about whether being human was enough for them. Later, as they walked, she asked if he remembered anything about the Almighty Land before arriving in Chaos, but he didn't. She mentioned that she envied him for losing all his memories. Confused, Jaehwan asked why losing memories was a good thing. She explained that most people in Chaos would envy him because everyone came to Chaos for a specific reason. Jaehwan then asked how she ended up there. She stopped and warned him that knowing the answer would bring deep regret. After a long walk, they arrived at a place called Gorgon Fortress, which she likened to a village. While they approached the fortress, Jaehwan noticed a location resembling the summoning ground on the first floor of the tower and wondered about its purpose. Suddenly, a faint light emerged, revealing countless people pleading for salvation. Jaehwan realized this was the summoning ground for the deceased, while the woman hinted that he might find the answer to her arrival in Chaos. She advised him not to ask that question here and welcomed him to the world of the dead. Curious, Jaehwan asked if those who died in the Almighty Land ended up in Chaos, to which she confirmed, adding that dying in Chaos marked the end, with people becoming nutrients for the illusion tree. Guards from the fortress appeared, handing out clothes and instructing the newcomers to line up for the speech hall. The woman called out to one of them, James, and explained she was just passing by. She requested to be allowed in quickly since they knew her identity. James, recognizing her as Mino, apologized and said they had to check everyone's identification to enter the fortress. She turned to Jaehwan, who admitted he had no identification. Realizing it would be hard for him to enter, she told James she'd forgotten her identification and offered him a horn as a substitute. James loudly announced that her identification was verified and let her in. Then, James turned to Jaehwan, asking for his identification. Jaehwan confessed he had none and asked about the consequences. Mino explained he was in trouble and offered to help him out. James clarified that without proper identification, entry into the fortress was impossible. Jaehwan stood there, leaving Mino worried about his intentions, thinking he might consider harming the guards to get inside. However, she quickly pushed the thought aside. She believed he might be eccentric but would never actually do it. However, as she visualized the entire scenario, doubt began to creep in. Maybe he would actually go through with it. So, she hurriedly stepped in, making up a false story about his identity to let him in. But before she could speak, someone approached from behind, leaving Mino shocked and anxious. When the newcomer appeared, all the soldiers lined up and saluted him. Mino revealed that he was the most famous person in the fortress, Captain Carlton, known for maintaining the cleanest checkpoint in Chaos. Carlton then walked over to James and asked about the situation. James explained that Jaehwan wanted to enter the fortress but lacked identification. Carlton looked at Jaehwan and said he couldn't let him in, which made Jaehwan ask why. Carlton, as the captain, claimed the authority to deny entry to those without proper identification, citing the laws of Gorgon. The guards all bowed to show respect for Carlton, and those who didn't were forced to kneel. In response, Jaehwan reached for his sword and told Carlton to stop. Holding his sword, Jaehwan stated he didn't care about the law and asked about the details on the identification. Carlton explained that it included the person's name, job, skills, partial status, criminal record, and other information. Jaehwan declared he didn't need such identification and wouldn't verify himself. Realizing his authority didn't work on Jaehwan, Carlton said he would restrain him and used his silver light restraint skill. Chains suddenly appeared around Jaehwan, but with a swift movement, he broke them, shocking both the guards and Carlton. Jaehwan then pointed to Mino and asked if she couldn't do what she had done earlier, making her nervous, fearing her bribery would be revealed. She tried to stop him, but Jaehwan quickly threw a crystal at Carlton. James, who had accepted the bribe from Mino, shouted at Jaehwan out of fear and suggested Carlton should execute him. Carlton examined the crystal, asked if Jaehwan was his name, and confirmed it. He then smiled and called Jaehwan the emissary of the Deer Whisperer. As part of the identity check, Carlton evaluated Mino's level of spiritual corruption, which exceeded 15%, and recommended she get treatment. Carlton showed her the test results and told her she knew what to do, and she agreed. Jaehwan, however, was puzzled about what spiritual corruption was. Mino explained that it was a disease affecting everyone in chaos, and it increased just by existing there, which was why the horn of a horned beast was valuable. She also mentioned that James had been interested in it because the horns were the only thing that could ease spiritual corruption in chaos. While she explained this, Carlton approached Jaehwan and said he needed to evaluate him, bringing the tool to test spiritual corruption close to him. As the tool got closer to Jaehwan, it started beeping, indicating it couldn't measure his level of spiritual corruption. The captain and the guards were surprised by this, but shortly afterward, the tool displayed Jaehwan's spiritual corruption as 0%, making Carlton smile. Taking Jaehwan's hand, Carlton said he would return the crystals to him now that the verification was done, placing them in Jaehwan's hand. Jaehwan asked if he didn't need them, to which Carlton replied that these crystals weren't something he should easily give to someone else, addressing him as the envoy of the Green Pyrrhus clan. Jaehwan held the crystals and confidently told them he wasn't the Green Pyrrhus envoy the captain had mentioned. Carlton, wearing a smile, acknowledged that he already knew this and allowed them inside. James wondered if it was right to let them in so easily. Carlton explained that the crystals Jaehwan possessed were far from ordinary. They not only boosted one's spiritual power but had additional abilities. To illustrate, Carlton removed his gloves, revealing severely burned hands. This revelation made James realize the crystals had caused the burns. Carlton clarified that only a member of the Green Pyrrhus clan could effectively use the Spectre crystals. He also pointed out that Jaehwan, despite not fitting the typical Green Pyrrhus appearance, had the power to use them, which earned Carlton's trust. Carlton reminded James of the time they attempted to measure Jaehwan's spiritual corruption, but the device showed an error, despite being considered infallible. Perplexed, James asked what this meant, and Carlton explained that the device couldn't measure Jaehwan's spiritual corruption because his spirit was purer than anyone else's in chaos. Therefore, Carlton emphasized that Jaehwan's identity didn't matter. What counted was finding someone who could wield the Spectre crystals. He revealed that the people inside the castle would now pass judgment on Jaehwan. Hearing this, James inquired whether it was related to the Castellan's condition, but the captain admitted he didn't have all the details. Then, he turned away from James and mentioned rumors of someone taking bribes to allow people inside. This made James nervous. Meanwhile, Jaehwan and Mino navigated the confusing streets of the village within the fortress. As they walked, Jaehwan commented on the complex paths, while Mino followed, still in a daze. Seeing her condition, Jaehwan remembered that the captain had punished her for bribing the guards, causing her to lose consciousness for a while. As they walked up a bridge, Jaehwan approached a passerby and asked if there was a blacksmith who specialized in swords. This caught the attention of the person under the bridge.